Father God, as we linger a little longer in your presence, as we meditate upon your word, it's my humble prayer, Lord, that you will open our hearts and our minds to allow you to speak to us. It's my prayer, Lord, that you and you alone would be lifted up in our meditation this morning. Make our worship a blessing, is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Facing the storms of life. December 29th, 2009, the Washington Post had a beautiful article about religion in New Zealand. The article went on to say that 31% of the people in New Zealand do not have any religion whatsoever. The previous prime minister was an agnostic, never believed in God. The present prime minister says that he is only a nominal Christian, goes to church once in a while. And the article went on to say that in a very short period of time, they are going to put up ads in the buses in the major cities of New Zealand. And the ad is going to read this: probably God is nowhere. In fact, it says probably there is no God. So stop worrying and enjoy life. Something of the similar nature was also put up in the city of London a few months ago. That attracted my mind very much. And then on the 24th of this month, as I was sitting and watching the news, ABC News, weekend news at about 6:30 in the evening, there was a segment news about Professor Craig, who is a professor at the Harvard University, one of the premier universities in the world and also in this country. He was born into a Jewish home, but today he doesn't consider himself as a Jew. He considers himself as a humanist. He has a large following in that campus, and so he has started a new congregation based on the book that he has written, Being Good Without God. Being good without God. We live in a world where God is left out in each one of our lives. Either God exists or God does not exist. And to many people in the world today, God does not exist. The very first Sabbath of the year 2010, we looked into the early reign of King Hezekiah. And we noticed that the moment he came to the reign of the kingdom of Judah, he brought about reformation revival in the kingdom of Judah by restoring this sanctuary service that was abandoned for a number of years. He also implored the people to trust God and not in earthly kings. And then very passionately, he helped people to serve the Lord. And that we took it from the 18th chapter of the book of 2 Kings. And if you continue to read the chapter, you'll notice that the more that Hezekiah tried to lead the kingdom of Judah, more towards God, to worship God and not the heathen gods, and to trust him and not someone else, you find that the Assyrian kingdom, which was now the most powerful kingdom on earth, began to threaten them more and more again. In fact, the warning, the counsel that the chief officer of the Assyrian king gave to Hezekiah and to the people of the kingdom of Judah was no different than what we see in New Zealand, in Australia, in Europe, and even in our country today. Man seems to be depending upon his own intellect, his own wisdom, his own relations, his own manipulations, his own reasoning, his own logic. Can you think of a man who has no good in himself whatsoever, thinking of trying to be good without God? What does Apostle Paul say? What I must do, I don't do. What I should do, what I should not do, I do. We are, as carnal beings, we are always inclined to do what is wrong. It is very easy for us to sin. It is very difficult for us to abstain from sinning. That is human nature. And here we have people saying that we can still be compassionate, loving, kind, without having God in your lives. This morning I thought, as I was preparing this sermon, I thought I would go a step further and come to the 19th chapter and pick up some important guidelines that we can use in our Christian walk as we face the challenges, the storms in the year 2010. Because some of you have come to me and have shared some of the challenges that you face in life. And you are not alone. Every one of us, including myself, every one of us have our own challenges, own storms in life that we face day in and day out. And as I meditated and as I prayed and as I researched, I was led more into the book of 2 Kings and also the book of Isaiah and other prophets that have written about the reign of King Hezekiah. And I was able to draw some important lessons. But let me set you the stage for what we are going to meditate upon this morning. The moment that Hezekiah began to reign in the kingdom of Judah, you find that the northern kingdom of Israel, comprising of 10 tribes, was already plundered by the Assyrian king. Many were taken as captives. Now you find that they also came and ruined the city of Samaria, the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel. And including the king, they were taken as captives. And what makes it worse? They were now almost at the verge of attacking Jerusalem, which was just 50 miles away from the city of Samaria. And then the Bible also tells me in the very first few verses, the last few verses in the book of 2 Kings chapter 18, you find that the chief officer of the Assyrian king begins to challenge not only King Hezekiah, but also the God whom they trusted. It is under these circumstances that you find that we come into the very first few chapters that was read to us by Sunita, the 4 verses. You find that Hezekiah decides to do something about what was going to happen to him. And so you find that there are 3 guiding principles that I can derive when I look into how Hezekiah tried to weather the storm in his own life as an individual and also as a king. The first important lesson that I derive from here is that he realized that there is a need of a contrite heart. Look into the very first verse of 2 Kings chapter 19. And what does it say? And when it was told to him as to what is happening around the city of Jerusalem, what does he do? He says he began to he tore his clothes and began to wear sackcloth. That's exactly what you find that he did. He begins to mourn over what was happening to his kingdom, because he was sad what was happening to the northern kingdom of Israel, and now the same thing was about to happen to his kingdom. And so what does he do? He begins to weep and he begins to cry. He begins to have a heart that was contrite and a penitent heart. Keep in mind, as I pointed out, the northern kingdom of Israel is destroyed. It is shattered. It is broken. The king and the people have been taken as captives. Samaria is in ruins. And now the city of Jerusalem is surrounded by the Assyrian army. No wonder he is in a great storm in his own life as a king, in his own life as an individual, as a child of God. And so what does he do? The Bible declares again in the very first verse, if you read very carefully, that he began to cover himself with sackcloth. He tore his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth. And if you study very carefully in the Old Testament time, sackcloth was a very coarse garment of cloth that was worn as a sign of grief and penitence. That was the time when people would wear sackcloth. Hezekiah realized that his help comes only from above. Just like King David that he writes in Psalms 121, my help comes from the Lord that made heaven and earth. Hezekiah realized my help is not going to come from the east, not from the west, not from the south, not from the north. My help is going to come from above. He also realized that to approach an omnipotent God, an omniscient God, he needs to meet the prerequisite. And the prerequisite, my friends, is to have a penitent heart. For when you have a penitent heart, there is lack of pride.